What was Darth Vader's thoughts when he came face to face with the lightsaber of Anakin Skywalker after 20 years? Greetings, acolytes of the Force, and welcome back to the archives. The weapon of Anakin Skywalker was his most prized possession, and the day he lost it on Mustafar was the day that he lost one of his best friends and close companions, his wife, and where Anakin Skywalker died. But on that moment, it was curious for Anakin Skywalker as he obsessed over his lightsaber, a lightsaber that we know that Luke would inherit. On the shores of Mustafar though, Anakin reached for his lightsaber and was filled with enormous amounts of rage when Kenobi picked it off of the burning shoreline. And it wouldn't be until 20 years later where Darth Vader would again gain possession of it momentarily. And we have reason to believe from Vader himself that it bothered him a great deal that Luke was wielding the lightsaber of Anakin, as the Dark Lord was hit with intense mixed emotions. And in today's holocron, we are going to explore the full story of Darth Vader's emotions when he finally saw the lightsaber after 20 years. But before we open our holocron, we must inform you of a terrible vision our mystics have had. They foresaw that some of you who are watching have not yet subscribed. Our archives are ever expanding every day with brand new knowledge from a galaxy far, far away. So if you'd like to be notified when we upload, be sure to force crush that subscribe button and become an acolyte. Now, let the holocron begin. Our story happens very shortly after the Battle of Yavin, with Luke and the full gang heading undercover into an Imperial arms factory on the world of Kai Moon 1. Disguised as delegates from the court of Jabba the Hutt, Han, Luke, and Leia meet with the Imperials under the pretense of negotiations between the Hutt clan and the Empire. The rebels' real plan, though, was to free the slaves that were being forced to work at the plant and then blow the entire thing up, striking a critical blow to the Empire's manufacturing resources. Their plan was marginally a success, but what they hadn't planned for was Darth Vader himself was arriving on the moon as well, and he was in charge of negotiations. Quickly, Vader would uncover the plot as he stormed the hallways, and he would finally come face to face with the boy that he saw on the Death Star, Luke Skywalker. Luke, who met his eyes with Vader, became enraged as he remembered how the Dark Lord slayed Ben Kenobi. Despite the ghostly voice of Obi-Wan begging Luke to run away from Vader, the young boy instead ignited the lightsaber. At this point, Vader had already sensed the Force very strong within Luke, but now coming face to face with the rebel that had destroyed the Death Star itself, Vader had questions. He says, "You hold that weapon like an untrained child. You have no right to it. You, boy, are no Jedi. Who are you?" Vader at the time is a stickler for technique and the traditional ways of respecting the Jedi weapon. Even though Vader was a Sith, he places great importance on those who are worthy to wield a lightsaber and those who are not. Luke doesn't respond to this insult, but instead accuses Vader for killing his father, to which the Dark Lord replies that he has killed many fathers, and that the boy will need to be more specific. Enraged, Luke lunges out with a wild attack, and Vader negligently parries it, sending Luke to the ground. He then pulls Luke's saber out of his grasp and into his own. Vader prepares to execute Luke with the two lightsabers just as he had done with Dooku, when suddenly something catches his eye, bringing the blue-bladed weapon closer to his face. It was as if Vader was looking into the eyes of an old friend, and Vader says quietly, "Wait, this lightsaber, I know this weapon. This once belonged to." He is then cut off by Han and Leia, who drive an AT-AT through the hallways where Luke and Vader were dueling. The freed slaves then begin pouring out into the main area, attacking the stormtroopers and running for freedom with the help of Luke. However, as Luke is running with the rest, his father's lightsaber flies through the air and into the chest of one of the slaves, eventually returning back to Darth Vader. Now focused back on the mission, Vader uses both of these lightsabers in tandem, the weapon he constructed as a Sith and the weapon of his old Jedi self, to murder and massacre all of the slaves that were escaping. He wields the lightsaber as if he never lost a beat with it, the feeling of its ribbed hilt a familiar one, as he now uses it for the purposes of evil. A lightsaber that once cut down hordes of Tusken Raiders in the honor of his mother was now being used to cut down slaves of all things, the very people Anakin desperately attempted to protect. He used his red saber in his main hand and the blue in his offhand, throwing it as a ranged weapon to kill the rebels from a distance, pulling the lightsaber back like a boomerang. While he is doing this, Vader watched as Luke fights back and runs his way through the stormtrooper lines on a speeder, and Vader thinks to himself, "That boy perhaps I was too hasty to dismiss him. Just what have you been up to now, Obi-Wan? It was then when Vader reaches out with the Force and dismantles the AT-AT that Han and Leia were driving, as Han moves it so that it would crash down on Vader when it fell over, causing Anakin's lightsaber to lose itself from the belt. In the rubble, the lightsaber laid on a piece of rock where Luke would manage to retrieve it, stealing it again away from the Dark Lord, as the rebels then desperately retreated. Finally, once Vader rose from the ashes, he says this: "That boy, Obi-Wan gave him my lightsaber." The single line gives us so much to what we need to know about Vader's inner thoughts. Despite now being a Lord of the Sith and having moved on to an entirely different weapon to suit his needs, he slipped and had a moment where he referred to the Jedi weapon as his lightsaber, as this is one of the rare moments where Vader's mask begins to crack open. Using the possessive pronoun my indicates that Vader still very much has a connection with the lightsaber. Like we stated earlier, this weapon was his life, his companion, and even a friend, an extension of himself. When it felt like everyone in his world was betraying him when he fell, his lightsaber remained by his side. Of course, it was he who betrayed everyone else, including the weapon itself, betraying its very honor. But in this moment of holding his familiar lightsaber in his hand, Anakin peeked out for just a moment, and he didn't just say he recognized the lightsaber, that he knew it. He puts the words into action in this very moment, using it effortlessly in tandem with his new Sith blade, never skipping a beat after 2 decades. On the shores of Mustafar, Vader hated that Kenobi took his lightsaber from him, and in the rise and fall of Darth Vader, we learned that he had reached out for it and attempted to take it with the Force, but that his body was in so much shock from the pain that he couldn't call upon the Force at all. He watched with burning hatred as Kenobi stole the lightsaber from him, and in his fury, Vader had even tried to reach out and choke Obi-Wan, but was unable to muster the Force. It is likely that he had wondered what happened to this weapon now for 2 decades, and we have talked at length before at how Anakin's lightsaber in the era of the Clone Wars was perfect. He made a weapon that was meant to conquer, and it was suiting him perfectly for that purpose when he became a Dark Lord. When Anakin became Vader, he had no intentions of giving up his lightsaber whatsoever, but now, as the masked Vader comes face to face with the original, he is filled with a storm of anger towards Obi-Wan, shock at seeing his weapon again, and a bit of pleasure being able to wield it, as well as an increased curiosity over Luke. After all of these events, Vader would report the rebel attack on the moon to Sidious, but purposefully would leave out the details of killing Ben Kenobi on the Death Star, meeting the boy, and seeing him wield the lightsaber of Anakin. It was likely he did this so that Sidious wouldn't accuse him of weakness or falling back into emotions of his old self. He also wanted to seek out Luke away from Sidious's view. This is where Vader's interest in the rebel boy turned to a full-blown obsession over Luke, the boy that now held his lightsaber, and the boy that had his name. It only makes sense that Vader would enlist the help of the #1 bounty hunter in the galaxy to track Luke and capture him. But that, my friends, is a story for another time. But there you have it, Darth Vader's thoughts on Anakin Skywalker's lightsaber after seeing it after 20 years. What are your own thoughts on this? And what are your thoughts on Vader calling it his lightsaber, a part of him that deeply missed the weapon? As always, my friends, thank you for visiting the archives today, and may the Force be with you.